Chapter 1. Part 3. Paulanna. Excuse me, but we must go back to 5 years before Agnoric's ascension to the White Lady. Most of the inhabitants of Shanaris believe that the elves have no problems. They live cloistered in their kingdoms protected by their magnificent defenses. Although the fall of Thanae made that halo of legendary invulnerability they had during the Age of the Damned disappear when they were defeated by the Black Empire. At the end of the Age of the Damned, only 3 of the ancient great elven kingdoms were left standing: Baudolania, Berseria and Landaria. The Dark Elves had long since been left without their kingdom invaded by the Stufos. As happened to the dwarfs of the Brown Hills, they could not resist. They were exiled from their deep realms and now roamed the south of Darsuk. When the Queen of Laudania asked for help for an invasion of Stufos, the King of Baudolania was more willing to help than when the Dark Elves begged him for help. The grudges that the king held against them for the ancient war between the elves were very evident and he flatly refused. Fortunately for Landaria, they were always regarded as loyal allies. The great king was more receptive and in response to the request sent a brigade of his best soldiers, the Knights of Elen, under the command of his son Prince Erinch. In addition, the problem that Landaria suffered was known to him, although he would never admit it publicly. The expedition made up of 2,000 knights embarked for Landaria. When they arrived at their destination, the situation they found was dantesque. The minds of the elves of Landaria were totally invaded by the Stufos, who, as was their tactic, advanced in an endless horde. No matter how many died, more always appeared from the depths to replace the fallen and continue advancing. Not only were they helped by the kingdom of Baudolania, the other Berseria elf kingdom, they came ready to help. They sent their best warrior Islanat, the Golden Lady, at the command of a great army, about 10,000 soldiers who landed from their wonderful ships. The elves of Berseria were very different from those of Baudolania, having previously aided the northern Freelands or the Dark Elves. And that help, although punctual, was much more than what Baudolania had been involved in the affairs of Shanaris, at least directly in the last era. Since the Berserians appeared, the war changed course. Thanks to the command of the Golden Lady, the Stufos subsided in their invasion. But it was a short-lived victory. The Stufos would attack again and again in numerous hordes until they achieved total domination of the mines. Fortunately, they found a way to create a permanent barrier to stop them. In a specific area of the mines there was a large abyss that was crossed through 2 majestic bridges. They were the only thing that allowed communication with the lower galleries on the other side of the abyss. By demolishing the bridges, the invasion would be stopped, since one thing was known about the Stufos: they never created galleries or built anything, they only occupied buildings that had already been completed. The Abyss Chamber was not a small place. It was called the Gallery of the 2 Twin Bridges. And once they recovered from the Stufo domain, preparations began for the collapse of the 2 bridges. Paulanna was enthusiastic. She was fighting alongside the Golden Lady, whom she had great admiration, a true commander whose troops followed her with devotion. What no one understood is the reason why Berseria did not help Thanae in his fall. Perhaps as Baudolania with the Dark Elves did not help them because they had grudges stored from the old war. Paulanna was a Knight of the Order of Elen. She had reached the rank of captain on her own merits, since they never made it easy for her. Born in the middle of the Age of the Damned, she grew up in a sad family, her mother depressed by the contempt of her father, who was always absent from home. She was not loved since she was not the desired male child. Everything changed with the birth of his brother a few decades later. It was the pride of his parents, their joy, the only thing that really united the family. In her brother's education they never spared any expenses. Paulanna was collecting the crumbs. She received the same education, but always as an accessory, since the classes were mainly for her brother. His achievements were never recognized. If he surpassed his brother, it was something his parents ignored. Still, she was the firstborn of the family and could not be denied the right to be Elen's knight. Despite the paternal reluctance, Paulanna insisted so much that the 2 brothers were admitted through the mediation of their father. It was there that she discovered the reason for her contempt on the part of her parents. there was a relationship between an elf and a man 10 generations before her birth. Which meant that Paulanna was not considered pure blood. But the worst thing is that there was a belief that human inheritance was only received by the elves of the family, hence the indignity of their lineage. His father had married his mother only because of the fact that the maternal family was reputed to possess an innate ability to father boys. Misfortune came during the War of Thanae, where his brother died. That death caused the downfall of his family, causing his mother's suicide. Since with Paulanna as the only heir, her lineage was stained. His father would die a little later, in the Battle of the Gorge of the Theres, where the Black Orc legions were massacred in revenge for the fall of Thanae. She was one of the few knights who did not participate in that battle. She was assigned to defend the northern borders. Her father did not consider her worthy to take revenge for the death of her brother. Paulanna faced with resignation the news of her father's death, but not her mother's suicide, since the reason was to have Paulanna as her only heir. It was a total contempt for the elf. Despite the hatred that the news of the suicide generated in her, it didn't really surprise Paulanna. In fact, it was approved and admired by many elves. Paulanna got ahead despite having everything against her. With her parents, she had long since distanced herself, and her brother always considered her as a burden in his career. Having a mixed-race sister would not allow her to rise in the court as much as she aspired. And the elf, once free of those chains, ended up achieving some recognition within the Order of Ellen, rising to the rank of captain, but deep down she knew that this was her ceiling. They would not let her rise anymore. The high ranks were reserved for pure bloods. She was the last of her lineage and no one cared. They did not consider her as one of their own at court. No one would risk marrying her since her children would inherit human blood, a crucial stigma. She was not well regarded in the royal palace. Paulanna was always destined to the borders, so it was not a surprise that she was assigned to the aid expedition to Landaria. The mission was not to the taste of the great knights of the order, and they sent the less appreciated. Despite these opinions, at court the great king had ordered his son Prince Enrich to command the expedition. He wasn't someone Paulanna had a special affinity with, but she had to accept it. He had to be very careful not to take the limelight away from the prince. It was well known that he eliminated all those who he considered could overshadow him. Enrich had taken this mission as an insult, having to fight Stufos underground to save other elves, whom the prince thought were inferior. The prince considered it as a contempt for his qualities and caused his already complicated character to be much more unpredictable and irascible than usual during the campaign. In addition, it did not help that he was always in the shadow of the Golden Lady. The prince had to accept her command and his total prominence during the campaign. For that reason the prince used to show a certain indolence to be present in the combat, but this time he could not escape, since it was the final battle. The Golden Lady's plan was to blow up the two bridges thanks to an ingenuity she had obtained from gnomes. The cousins of the dwarfs were usually talented at creating these explosive devices and were safer than relying on the intonations of a mage. The battle was unfolding as planned. The Stufos and the vermin that accompanied them had to retreat in the face of the great elf offensive.